The thru hiking community has a problem and it needs to stop right now. Like right now. I'm not talking about any of the obvious problems like yellow blazing or pink blazing or the rest of the blazing, boom, roasted yellow blazers. No, I'm talking about the problem of fear-mongering. Fear-mongering, the action of deliberately arousing, public fear or alarm about a particular issue. Yeah, that happens a lot when you're thru hiking. It happens on the Appalachian Trail, it happens on the PCT, and I'm willing to bet it happens on pretty much every single other long distance trail out there. And it needs to stop because it's not helpful, it only causes confusion, it causes, well, fear obviously, and very often it can lead to a lot of hikers changing their plans, making drastic changes to their hiking plans simply because of the rumors and the fear-mongering and the bullshit. Now, with that said, I do want to be clear that there are definitely folks out there who might engage in this fear-mongering behavior that aren't doing so with bad intentions. In fact, their intentions probably 99.969% of the time are actually very good intentions. They've identified a problem or a potential danger or hazard to thru hikers, and they want to make it known to everybody so that everyone can be safe. They want people to be safe. And look, I get that. But more often than not, and at least in my experience, anecdotal, the fear-mongering usually is overblown and just ends up causing way more problems. I'm going to give two specific examples of fear-mongering that I encountered, one from the Appalachian Trail and one from the PCT. First example happened on my Appalachian Trail thru hike. I was hiking through Pennsylvania, you know, good old Rocksylvania, which is a whole nother load of fear-mongering about the rocks. It's not that bad. But anyways, me and my hiking homies, but we were near Duncannon, Pennsylvania. And turns out in 2018, we had experienced record rains that year. And I say that with the quotations because literally every thru hiker who's ever hiked a trail always brags about how their year had like record bad weather and all this bullshit. But I don't know, I was told that by some people. It's probably not true. But what was definitely true is the fact that it had been raining a ton when we were going through this area of Pennsylvania. It had been raining so much that a portion of the trail, which was a day or two north of where we were, was flooded as shit. The rain has continued all day today, and we're hearing word that the trail north of where we're staying tonight is impassable because of flooding. In addition to that, there was a river crossing also in that same area roughly that was super swollen and super dangerous to the point where you couldn't cross it. We found out about all this stuff because other hikers around us were chit-chatting. They were talking it up. They were spreading this information. They were like, oh no, it's flooded. We can't go through. What are we gonna do? Now, I don't know exactly where all these hikers got this information from. It's possible that they did contact like the ATC or the Weather Channel or some bullshit like that, but I'm guessing most of what they heard probably started with the hikers that were actually in the area that got flooded and then got passed down via text messages and Instagram and Tinder and all that stuff to the hikers that were a few days behind, and now we're all trying to figure out what we're gonna do. And so talking to these people, it became very evident that a lot of them were really concerned about this. They had been fear-mongered. They had just been led to believe that like the trail was impassable. And so a bunch of them decided in the middle of Pennsylvania that they were going to flip from Duncannon all the way up to Katahdin and then hike south from there. Think about how big of a decision this is. I mean, you're literally going all the way up to Maine. That's gonna take a day or two minimum to get up there. It's gonna cost a ton of money. I saw people making this decision. I saw people getting off trail, and I thought, I'm gonna wait just a day or two before I make any drastic decisions like that. Because I'm telling you, these people that decided to do this, they did it very quickly. Within a day, they made this decision, made the plans, and got moving. I was like, I don't wanna make a rash decision like this. I really wanna just be calm, wait a few days and see what happens. And so that's what I did. Me and my hiking homies, we got to Duncannon, Pennsylvania, and we took a zero there. We were just gonna let the situation calm down. And after a day, after a zero, which was great, by the way, I got hammered in Duncannon, Pennsylvania. That's a depressing thought. We decided that we were gonna hike out because we had heard that some other people did and it was fine. And so we hiked out, and we got to the river crossing, and it was a little bit swollen, but all it took was a day for it to go down. And so it was a little bit sketchy, but it was totally fine. We made it across, no problems at all. And then the next day, we got to the section of trail that was flooded a little bit, and yeah, our feet got wet. Boo-hoo. You know, it wasn't that bad. We got through it. It was like a half-mile max, if I recall. And then it was fine after that. So all we had to do was wait a day and just not make a rash decision. And we didn't have to go through the drastic steps of flip-flopping or getting a ride up to Maine or skipping a part of the trail like some other people did. Like all we had to do was just not listen to the fear-mongering. I'm not saying you just ignore every single piece of information that you get. Take it all with a grain of salt and don't make any rash decisions. Example number 2, this one from the PCT, very recent. We're hiking through the desert. It's quite literally how I look when I'm hiking. We're in the desert and we're approaching Tehachapi, California. And all of a sudden, a day or two before we get there, we start to see all this speculation. And by the way, a lot of this fear-mongering, guys, it goes on between hikers, but it also goes on online, particularly in Facebook groups. Facebook sucks. And unfortunately, a lot of the fear-mongering takes place in Facebook groups. And so as I was approaching Tehachapi, I was poking around on the Facebook groups and I start to see a bunch of posts on Facebook about hikers getting sick in the section of trail from Tehachapi to Walker Pass. It's like 80 or 90 miles if I remember correctly. And I'm like, oh shit, that's literally the section we're about to go into in a couple days. I want to figure out what's going on. So I'm doing more and more research on this. And just rumors abound everywhere. Like people saying like, oh, I heard people got sick from this water source, or like people saying this water source is bad. There was maybe like a couple firsthand accounts, like people who actually got sick, but 99% of it was people that hadn't hiked that section yet or had hiked that section but didn't get sick themselves, just spreading rumors because nobody actually knew what was going on. Nobody knew which water source was making people sick, even though a lot of people claimed they did. Nobody knew if it was even the water that was making people sick in the first place. There was just so much chatter about this, and most of it was not from people who had actually gotten sick themselves. All this Facebook chatter very quickly morphed into chatter among hikers on the trail and in town once we got to Tehachapi. And when we got to town, we learned that a bunch of hikers decided to just skip that section. They skipped all the way from Tehachapi to Walker Pass, and it was driven by the fear-mongering. Although, to be honest with you, I'm sure a lot of them were just kind of looking for any excuse to skip miles. They thought that they were gonna get sick if they went through. But the thing was, they just took all this information they learned on Facebook and through the grapevine, talking to other hikers, and they just made a rash decision to abruptly skip a pretty good chunk of the trail. And it also didn't help that the world-renowned journalistic outlet of Newsweek published a freaking article about the situation. Must have been a slow news week or something, because they published this article titled "Algal Bloom Potentially Sickening Hikers on California Trail." An algal bloom may have poisoned the only available drinking water along a popular hiking trail on the West Coast, sickening hikers who have consumed it. Groups of hikers on the Pacific Crest Trail are skipping a section of the Californian desert to avoid areas with an algal bloom in the only available drinking water. So reading that, you might think, well, that sounds terrible. But here's the thing. Did you notice the word potential in there a bunch of times? Yeah, these idiots didn't actually know what was causing. This was just a theory. These journalists decided to just run with it. And right there in the article, you saw they were implying that a bunch of hikers were skipping this section of the trail. Then they go on to interview a hiker. But did they interview a hiker that actually got sick, like you think a real journalistic outlet would do? Of course not. They interviewed someone who heard rumors. That's right. Newsweek interviews hiker who read comments on Far Out is essentially what, this is so stupid. A 24-year-old hiker from the UK who is currently in the area told Newsweek that he and the other members of his hiking group are skipping a 90-mile section of the trail between Tehachapi and Walker Pass, where they heard about other hikers getting sick on the Far Out app. We scroll down even further into the article, and then here, this is the kicker. This is kind of my entire point here. PCTA Content Development Director Scott Wilkinson told Newsweek they are investigating reports of hikers getting sick. Really? Is that what he reported? Because this is his quote. "We actually aren't even certain the problem is harmful algal blooms, and our agency partners are testing water sources now." So the entire premise of this article is then all of a sudden turned on its head when we learn that they don't actually know. It's speculation. Some hikers did actually get sick, and from my best estimates, those hikers were a week or two ahead of where I was. But by the time I went through and I ignored this fear-mongering and I still hiked this section of the trail, nobody got sick. I drank the water, I filtered it, obviously. I was totally fine. And as far as I'm aware, nobody ever figured out what was causing hikers to get sick. It was all a bunch of fear-mongering on a massive scale, this time taking place with a journalistic outlet. The PCTA, though, they're doing their best to keep people safe. And then of course, just with a lot of chatter on Facebook and a lot of chatter amongst hikers. A lot of hikers skipped that section of the trail, even though the problem of people getting sick on that section had long since passed. The big takeaway from this example is do your own research. Don't just listen to everybody else. Ask questions about the situation. Again, I'm not saying to just write it off completely right from the start, but ask questions. When I first saw this situation unfolding, I thought, man, it's quite bizarre that 90% of the people talking about this are not actually the people that got sick. Why haven't I heard from any of the people that got sick? And then I went to far out and I scrolled back on the comments on the water sources there, and there was a few comments from people who got sick. They were all a good week plus ahead of where I was. I was actually in the middle of this section of trail when I saw that article from Newsweek come out. I was like sitting there filtering water, like the water that they're saying is like contaminated, as I'm reading this article, and I was like, man, nobody here is sick. It's fine. Clearly, whatever it was had ended long before I got there, and the rumors just kept persisting, and it's quite sad. It's quite sad. What also is sad is that not all of you are subscribed to the channel. If you're not subscribed yet, let's get this channel to 50,000 subscribers. Subscribe, dude, and don't listen to the